Now that we just took a closer look at the first 35 out of the 281 pieces in the ultimate schematic, let's revisit the next 5 pieces, pieces 36 to 40. Remember, there are 11 main events that have drastically changed the fate of mankind, and those are piece numbers 9A, when our brains nearly doubled in size, pieces 36 to 40, these are the 5 things we mastered that we had never mastered before, and then pieces 95 to 99, which are the 5 bad applications or the 5 main mistakes that are causing most of our problems. And if we put the human existence on a football field like we did earlier, where we have 100 yards, which is like 100 meters, that's good because now it's 100%, it's easy to think in these terms. But when we have yards, there's 3 feet per yard and 12 inches per foot. So when we look at these 11 main events, the first main event happened 2 million years ago, and that'd be 2/3 into our existence. And if we round up to make this simple, which we're going to, let's go to 67%. The 67-yard line is where our brains nearly doubled in size, and it kept growing. And then we went 20 more yards on this football field, another 1.2 million years before we finally mastered the very first of 5 things that we mastered. And that happened 12 yards down the road on the 99-yard line, or on the 1-yard line, 99% into our existence. And that is the first bad application. That's the fall of mankind. So for 99% of our existence, we were living in paradise. We were playing in paradise. But we made a bad application to the first thing we mastered. And then we went another 10,000 years down to the 2.5-foot line. So the 1-yard line would be 60,000 years. The 2.5-foot line is when we make the second mistake. That's 50,000 years ago. And that's when we mastered animals and we started eating food that we're not biologically adapted to eat. Then we went all the way down to the 6-inch line, another 2 feet down all the way 10,000 years ago when we had the agricultural revolution. And that's the third mistake. That's when we started eating plants that we're not biologically adapted to eat. Oh boy, and then the last 2 mistakes are very, very, very close. The fourth mistake is when we mastered machines, the Industrial Revolution. And that happened about 10 generations ago, and it took a while before we made a bad application and started processing our food with it. But that would be approximately the 14th of an inch line. And to be honest with you, I made these calculations quite a while ago, and I need to revisit those. In fact, that's why I made a mistake when I talked about how many generations that would be. For the last mistake, I mistakenly said 8, and it should only be 4. So that's the 5th mistake. The 5th thing we mastered are chemicals. And that happened about 70 years ago, or 75 years ago rather. I used to say 3.5 generations, and now it doesn't make sense to say 3.75 generations, and yet here I am saying it. Almost 4 generations ago is what I meant to say earlier, and I misspoke and said 8, and I knew that was wrong when I said it, and I corrected it down below. But nonetheless, that happened maybe on the 1/28th of an inch line. The point here is that the very first mistake is what we have to be aware of and correct it, because that's the mistake that is referred to as the fall of mankind. That's when we fell from nature. We opted out of nature. We took something we mastered from nature and we applied it to something we needed in nature. Remember, in my simple parable, there's just 2 trees in the Garden of Eden, in paradise, the trees of life and the tree of knowledge. And the problem with knowledge that we acquire, like these 5 things we mastered, is with all new knowledge comes the potential for evil if we make a bad application and apply it to something we need, and that's what we did. That's how we came up with 11 main events. It all started when we became too clever for our own good. What's up, Sienna? And was able to do things we weren't able to do before. And with everything we invent or whatever, there's other applications that go on and on and on. And we went for a long time. When we first mastered that first thing, that was like 40,000 generations ago. We went 37,000 generations before someone said, hey, let's do this with it. Big mistake. So big it's referred to as the fall of mankind. Now a lot of people are going to want to argue with this, but you have to look into this more objectively and look at, well, what did the first mistake do? It destroyed a nutrient that feeds one of our senses. It's termed a biophoton, and we store this coherent sunlight energy in the nucleus of our cells, and then cells use that to communicate to everything else. And what we've done is we've lowered this level. According to Fritz Albert Popp, or at least what Gabriel Cousens says, according to the studies he's read, and I hope he's quoting accurately, he said that we're born at 43,000 biophotons, and that most of us are somewhere out between 1,000 and 23,000. So we start off at 43,000, we're going downhill because we're destroying the nutrient that feeds this sixth sense of ours, when we should be going up to like 83,000. And then when you do the very first of my three-step process, it bumps it up to 114,000. Now, how would Dr. Popp know this? Because it's the number one way they heal in Germany. Alternatively, people around the world see the value of what this first step I perfected does. And it's not just as simple as doing this. You got to make sure that you don't just remove the primary causes, which is primarily what my first step does. It's one of the 3 ways to correct these 5 mistakes, and I'll reference that if you want to learn more about that. But it's the only one that's doable by enough of us to get everyone's attention. And it's only something we do on a temporary basis, again, so we can see what we're missing. And that's the problem we have, is none of us are in a position to really evaluate what we're doing and what we need to do, because we don't know what we're missing. We don't think it's going to be a fair trade. So don't run off, Sienna. I almost lost her the other day, darn it, because I got so engrossed with this camera here. Anyway, Dr. Popp knows this to be true simply because he's over there. He has a meter. He invented this instrument in 1974 where he could measure this coherent sunlight energy that's stored in the nucleus of our cells. And it only makes sense. How are cells going to be able to communicate? That's the key word we want to remember, is communication. With biophotons, we have communications. Without communication, what do we have? Chaos. And what do we have when we have chaos? We end up with 10 subsequent needs from having a weak connection to everything. Look at government, for example. That's piece 7.3, or as a problem of knowledge. It's also 34.3, or 4 rather, 34.4 and 7.4. The 0.3 would be the media. But the government, our subsequent need for government, is there because we're out of control and we need something to help control us. But every system we create is sick because they're made up of us, so no system is going to be able to help us. And oddly enough, the ultimate answer for government is anarchy. But anarchy does not work in a sick world. And anarchy only means without leaders. Anarchy only works, or is actually what we get when we're playing in paradise. When we do the right thing, we don't need leaders. And that's what we have. It's actually, anarchy is on our to-get list. When we do what it takes, when we bump up our biophotons, we won't need leaders. We'll have anarchy. So it's not like, oh, we want to have anarchy. So people who are advocating anarchy now don't realize anarchy doesn't work in a sick world. You got to make the world healthy first. And then once you do that, that's on your to-get list. It's a common mistake a lot of people make. They look at things on our to-get list and they say, that's what we need right there. Yeah, that's what we need, but how do we get there? That's the third stage. We got to go back to the second stage. What are we doing? What do we got to do to make this happen? Well, that's where we got to correct these 5 main mistakes. So when we do 36 to 40, we're going to not make a bad application to one of our needs, which happens to be piece 24. And if we satisfy piece 24, it becomes piece 63. If we don't satisfy it, it becomes piece 83. And then there's 5 applications to piece 24. So now we got 83.1 to 83.5. And when I first identified those, I said, those are too important. I want to give them whole numbers. So again, before I assigned numbers to everything, I automatically hid those 5 pieces and created 5 more pieces simply because they're the most important piece of the puzzle. So the 11 main events, piece 9A, Brain Got Smart, pieces 36 to 45, things we mastered, and 95 to 99, which were 83.1 to 83.5, are 5 bad applications. That's how we get all these 103s that are within our control. And what do? We use the wrong approach. We look at our problems individually instead of collectively. Piece 8.5. Ain't that right, Sienna? Come over here and tell them it's 8.5. Sienna, come on. Come here. Yes, 8.5. We use the wrong approach. We don't want to identify the 103s. That's part of the magic act. Uh-oh, my baby got a splinter, or not a splinter, but a sticker. That's part of the magic act. Remember, cause and effect. What do? Sleight of hand. Don't look at this hand over here, rather. Look at this hand. Cause, effect, cause, effect. I'm going to name your problem based on the effect. Don't you see how they're tricking us? Don't look at the symptom unless it's life-threatening. What you want to do is go back and look at the causes. That's why I hid those 19 pieces in 103. I didn't want to show all of them. I didn't want to confuse everybody. I want to make it simple. Sienna, come back here. Come. Sienna. Come. Come back here. Come. My dog's going deaf, so she can't hear me. I got to yell at her. Come. Sienna, come. She's also going blind, so she can't even see me. Come over here. Come. She's starting to wander. This is what she did last time. Dang it. Glad I saw it this time. Sorry for that interruption. So where was I? I have no idea. Yeah, I hid those pieces for a reason. So again, when I first created my first universal numbering system, I automatically said, well, let's create these 5 pieces because they're the most important pieces. So that's how everything started. We applied 36 to 40 to 24. We slid down 109, the fall of mankind. We got the 83.1 to 83.5, which are really 95 to 99. Then we got the 103s, but now we're sick. We prey upon ourselves, and we misdirect, or the sickest of us misdirect our so-called experts to make sure they can't figure any of this out. They put them in that piece 106. Remember, they're in that doorway that's blocking the mistakes to the negative effects. So what do doctors do? They give us drugs or poisons that interfere with the body's communication process. Most drugs are fit into 2 categories. I actually created 4 categories by looking at it from outside the box. The only category that makes any sense, I don't even call it a drug, those would be hormones from other animals like insulin and thyroxine. But then you got 3 main categories. It's anti-something, and I could go, I could talk quite a while for that one, but I won't. But the other 2 are the ones we want to focus on now. These are the blockers and inhibitors. Most drugs will fall into that class, and it's like a magic act. You see, our body uses a lock and key communication system. The keys, good girl, the keys are the hormones and the enzymes. And then we have receptor sites that are like the locks. So the hormones and enzymes come in, and they turn something on the organ goes, oh, I got to do this. That's how the body communicates. What do drugs do? Well, we have inhibitors that kill the keys or kill the hormones or enzymes that don't allow the body to produce those, so the body can't communicate. And if they can't find one that works, or it might be easier, or they'll do both, they'll find a blocker. Don't you go nowhere, Sienna. They'll use a blocker to occupy the receptor sites. It's like sticking something in the lock so you can't come in and put your key in. It's a magic act. Everything that is being done upon us is a trick. That's the purpose of my special teaching tool, the ultimate schematic, is to help us not get tricked and to get fooled. We're already tricking ourselves when we slide up 112 and we have a 103 in limbo, where we actually eventually get a positive effect from something that's harmful, like smoking cigarettes. Hey, I coughed my head off at first. Look, I'm not coughing anymore. It's not bad for me. That's because you got a 103 in limbo. It's going to take a while before it comes back down. Same thing happens with heart disease or cancer. So we can be tricked very easily. We trick ourselves by thinking we're seeing a positive results by making mistakes because we built a tolerance to it. That's piece 5, a malfunctioning survival mechanism. But the main thing is our so-called experts trick us by making sure we don't manifest a negative effect. So there are blockers in 106 and 105. The doctors are put in 106 to not allow a symptom to manifest. Blockers and inhibitors interfere with the body's communication process. Magic, no more negative effects. Take this drug, keep doing what you're doing. You're not doing anything wrong. It boggles my mind that we accept this tripe from people that don't study it, and then they say, well, we don't know what's causing it. 90% of the problems, we don't know the cause of it, but we know it's not this. What? You don't know the cause, but you know for sure it's not this, and yet you don't even study it, and we buy it, and we believe it. Unbelievable. So that's where part of the magic act is at. And then we have prisons and asylums that in piece 105, and that's in between the thoughts and the actions. So how do you keep someone from acting out on their impure thoughts? Well, you lock them up. You don't let them take action. And it's a magic act. We don't get any negative C's, but the only way to not have a problem, that's the whole purpose of this series of videos, is to help get rid of problems that are within our control, is to work backwards and don't focus on the symptom, don't fall for the effect, name your problem on the cause. It's bad air, it's bad water, it's bad food. Oh my God, don't talk about food. Yes, that's why we want to do something we've never done before on a temporary basis. So we can correct these 5 main mistakes. And then once we do that, we'll have a brand new reference, but we can't do it until we find the knowledge. So we're stuck in this negative horizontal loop where we start our journey off in life because of traditions in the negative A box of false knowledge, and we make bad applications, we make mistakes, we end up with all these problems that are within our control. But remember, we have an inaccurate belief system. Most of us don't know that we have false knowledge in place of knowledge we need, and remember, we cannot learn anything when we think we already know. And I know I've already said this before, but it's worth pile driving it again. False knowledge is keeping us from finding the knowledge we need. When we think we already know, are you even going to listen to me? No, I don't need to listen to that fool. I already know it's against what I already believe. That's not what you know. It's only what you believe. See, our belief system can be represented in the first stage of knowledge. And I actually created this by starting off with Einstein's circle of known, if it was really his. I don't believe half the stuff Einstein did was really his. Not all of it, actually. But nonetheless, Einstein had a really clever way of explaining the Einstein circle of known. I created a very separate video for this. You can click on this link right now and watch where I explain this in more detail. But I'm going to go over it again. Einstein had whoever it was, came up with a pretty interesting way to illustrate that we had ignorance that we knew about and we didn't know about. So we had a box like this, and inside the box there was a circle that represented our knowledge. So the box represented everything we knew. And then the circle represented what we knew inside that circle. And then everything outside of our circle, inside this box, is everything we don't know. That's our ignorance. But see, you got to really understand how the tricky people rule the world are, and how they turn villains into heroes, and they turn plagiarists into heroes that weren't. So they take the heroes and vilify and make them into bad people, and they do just the opposite. But nonetheless, that's a trick. By only looking at Einstein's circle unknown, it doesn't illustrate our belief system. So when I looked at Einstein's circle unknown, I said, well, that doesn't illustrate our belief system. We need another box. So we need a negative A box of false knowledge. So now our belief system can be represented by circles inside the plus A box of knowledge, and a circle and the negative A box of false knowledge. That's our belief system. And the problem with our false knowledge is we superimpose and we think it's inside of our circle. So if we're looking for knowledge we don't know outside of our circle, inside the box of knowledge, and we come upon the truth, and it's in conflict with what we think we know because we've got false knowledge up in there, it's rejected, saying, well, that can't come into piece one, which is that knowledge I'm talking about, the circle, because it's in conflict with what I believe to be true. That's why it's so hard to solve our problems. So the first step is to admit that we don't know. Obviously, we don't know, otherwise we wouldn't have any problems. In fact, if you just use your common sense, which most of us don't have, Emerson says society is always taken by surprise at any new level of common sense, doesn't even know it. But it's really simple common sense that we reap what we sow. It's not that complicated. So if we want to step back and look at the big picture, life is an illusion. And it's an illusion on so many levels, it's mind-boggling. We're on this negative horizontal loop. We've got the false knowledge, and the only way we can solve the problem, instead of putting blockers in 105, 106, is to make a transformative move or a vertical move, and that's where those 19 obstacles are at, the 12 sources of false knowledge and 7 wilderness factors. But then there's 21 pieces within pieces. That's how it comes up to 40. And then there are 8 duplications. The 7 wilderness factors strike twice, and so does the number 1 source for false knowledge. And then there are 2 more pieces that represent things that are outside of control, where we have limited control, and things outside of control where we have no control whatsoever. And those are 2 black boxes. So if you're looking for a flaw in in the ultimate schematic, my special teaching tool, there they are. I intentionally put these 2 black boxes in there just so you can say, I found the flaw. Okay, fine, take them out. They're just here for illustrative purposes. They're inconsequential. What we're talking about here, for example, would be like bad luck in one and carelessness in another. So again, just throw them out if you don't like it. The main point, though, is that we have to make a vertical move. We got to go through 2 doorways to solve our problems. We got to recognize that we're doing it to ourselves. It's because our brain became too clever for our own good. We mastered things we had never mastered before. And then there's that battle between the brains. Remember, piece 9 has 9A and B. 9A is the neocortex that got really smart. But then we have 9B. Don't go anywhere, Santa. The 9B, which would be our reptilian brain, which can get addicted to anything that's pleasurable. So that's what got us in trouble. For whatever reason, whether it is because we were curious or because we had to survive, we are opportunistic for when survival comes into play. So maybe we did it by mistake, but for some reason we haven't been able to realize it's a mistake because it's become part of who we are. Think about it. It only takes a generation or 2 before we can pass on a bad mistake, and then people grow up with it and they don't realize it, and you don't want to change traditions. It's what everyone did. Again, this explains why this is such a hard thing to do. So there's an urgency to this message. We got to reach the tipping point, because if we don't reach the tipping point, things will never change. It's really that simple. Good girl. There are a lot of ways to correct these mistakes. I identified 3 main ways. 2 of them, not enough people are willing to do. And oddly enough, a lot of people in there say, well, we shouldn't do number 3. We shouldn't even do that. They don't realize it. They just haven't put enough thought into this to realize that things will never change unless we reach the tipping point. And the way most of us are doing it now, it's not working. In fact, it was tried hundreds of years ago, and with much more success. 5,000 people would come and tend to listen to people talk. Of course, now with the internet, we can expand that to even more. But nonetheless, we're not congregating like we used to. Of course, they didn't have the internet back then, so maybe it's a moot point. Sienna, don't go anywhere. Sienna, hey, don't start wandering off. Good girl. So, what is it time for? It's time to test an idea's time has come. It's time to go where few have gone so far. But that's going to change real quick, because you're a trim tab. If you've been listening to me this long, you are a trim tab to society. You're going to be the rudder on the rudder that keeps our ship from hitting that iceberg, or the herd from going off the cliff. In fact, that's what happened when we mastered the very first thing. We used it to herd animals off the cliff. That's how we mastered animals initially. We'd burn down, we'd set the forest on fire, and boom, all the animals would go running off the cliff. And that's what we're doing. We're running off the cliff. We're headed for an iceberg. Never before in time of our existence has there been a need for a vast majority of us to duplicate what Bill Bright had already done. He had 14 million people doing this. We can expand that way beyond it. Once you do it, you realize, oh my God, there really is something to it. And I know because I've done it over 1,100 days in the last 23 years. I know from personal experience, and I've coached thousands of people. And I know when I say you guys are in for a treat, I know what I mean. I'm coming from my heart. I've done it too many times, and I do it once a year just to remind myself it's more fun than what I was doing. And you'd think I'd know that by now, but I always love what I'm doing just like everyone else does. So please find the courage to test an idea as time has come. And when you do, you'll look back and say, damn, that was a treat. Well, now let's pan over and show you my Sienna. I had this problem last time when I tried to pan down there. I didn't have the camera set up. I didn't even know if she was in it. There's my baby. Sienna, little girl. Sienna. Say hi to the camera. Sienna. Poor baby's losing her hearing. Sienna. See if I can detach myself quickly from this tripod. Sienna. Say hi to the internet. Come here, girl. Sienna. Can you hear me, girl? There's my sweeters. Look at my sweeters. She is so sweet, aren't you, girl? Aren't you the best thing ever? Aren't you? Huh? You can just look at her. Can't you tell she's sweet? I am so sweet. It's because my daddy loves me. Ain't that right, baby? Who loves you? Sienna, girl. Baby sweeters. Say bye. Come on, smile for the audience. She always has a smile on. Hey, your dog is smiling. Yeah, I know. We're both happy. Bye-bye.